A forbidden secret inside Ferrari's garage. Fred Vasseur breaks silence, pointing directly at the FIA. Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari hides something the cameras weren't supposed to see. And in Mexico's qualifying, that secret finally exploded into pure performance. From the moment his car rolled out of a garage, something felt different. The Ferrari looked planted, balanced, almost serene in the way it cut through the first sector. The telemetry told a story that numbers alone couldn't explain. Stability where there had been chaos, grip where there had been guesswork. In those moments, you could almost sense that Hamilton had unlocked a version of the SF-25 that had been sleeping all year, restrained not by lack of talent or effort, but by invisible hands adjusting the rulebook's fine print. And as Fred Vasseur hinted later, those hands belonged to the FIA itself. The revelation came quietly, buried in a post-qualifying comment that most dismissed as routine. But Vasseur's words carried weight. Let's just say we're now running the car the way it was originally designed. To the untrained ear, that sounded harmless. To those who understand the language of Formula One politics, it was dynamite. It meant that something had been held back, a calibration, a system, perhaps a configuration that Ferrari had been forced to switch off in previous rounds. Suddenly, Hamilton's breakthrough lap made perfect sense. He wasn't just fast, he was finally free. Behind the scenes, engineers had whispered about this all season. A braking module, a floor interaction, a thermal mapping protocol, every theory pointing toward the same idea. Ferrari's hands had been tied. The FIA's technical directives, intended to ensure fairness, had blurred the line between control and constraint. Yet in Mexico's thin air, under the pressure of 2,200 meters of altitude, that limitation disappeared. Whether through authorization, oversight, or pure calculated risk, Ferrari restored Hamilton's full driving arsenal. The car that had once fought him now danced under his command. The numbers alone were enough to shake the paddock. Lewis Hamilton's best lap 1 minute, 15 seconds, 938 thousandths, placed him just 3/10 behind pole sitter Lando Norris and 1/10 behind Charles Leclerc. But the stopwatch only told half the story. For the first time this season, the SF-25 didn't bite back. It flowed. Engineers inside the Ferrari garage reported that Hamilton's steering corrections had dropped by almost 15% compared to Austin. That meant stability, predictability, and most importantly, confidence. In a car that had spent months defying logic, Hamilton had finally found a rhythm that the data confirmed this wasn't a fluke. It was controlled aggression calculated through precision. Even the telemetry traces drew gasps. Through turns 1 and for the same corners that had humiliated him in Friday practice, Hamilton's brake pressure was linear, consistent, a sign of total control. Ferrari analysts revealed that his braking delta was now within 0.02 of Leclerc's after being over a tenth slower throughout the season. That kind of improvement doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from mechanical transformation. And that's where Fred Vasseur's quiet revelation took on weight. According to sources close to Maranello, Ferrari had been restricted by an FIA technical directive that limited dynamic load calibration in the rear suspension. Once those limits were reinterpreted, the SF-25 suddenly behaved like a proper Ferrari sharp on entry, stable under braking, alive in Hamilton's hands. What made this result even more astonishing was where it happened: Mexico, the most hostile environment for aerodynamics. At over 2,000 meters above sea level, the air density drops by nearly a quarter, robbing cars of downforce and stability. Yet Hamilton's Ferrari looked planted through the S-curves, carving lines that seemed impossible for a car that had spent most of the season sliding and snapping mid-corner. The difference lay in the floor, not a new one, but one Ferrari had been running in limited mode since the summer. The thin air, combined with the restored mapping permissions, allowed the SF-25 to generate cleaner airflow at the diffuser exit. The FIA might have hidden that truth in the paperwork, but Mexico's lap times exposed it. Inside Ferrari, the mood after qualifying bordered on disbelief. Hamilton's engineer Riccardo Adami reportedly described the session as the first time the car and driver spoke the same language. For 9 months, the communication had been a struggle, Hamilton requesting rotation and response, the car answering with understeer and unpredictability. But in Mexico, the dialogue was seamless. Ferrari's telemetry screens, once filled with red warning flags from braking instability, now glowed green across the board. The team didn't just see progress, they felt it. After months of being questioned, both Hamilton and Ferrari had proved that the problem was never a lack of talent, it was a system holding them back. The context made the performance even more heroic. Before Mexico, Hamilton hadn't stood on a podium since joining Ferrari. 19 Grands Prix of silence. That streak wasn't just statistical, it was psychological. The same man who once dominated the hybrid era had endured the most difficult season of his career, wrestling with a machine that refused to respond to his touch. Yet here he was back in the top 3, smiling with that familiar glint of determination. It wasn't a victory, but it was something purer, redemption in motion. The crowd at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez knew it too. They cheered not just for the Ferrari, but for the fighter who refused to surrender. And then came the whispers, quiet at first, then growing louder in the paddock corridors. Had Ferrari really been under technical restrictions all this time? Was the FIA holding back performance under the guise of regulation? Vasseur didn't deny it. He simply smiled and said, "We play within the rules they give us." That single sentence sent analysts into overdrive. Because in Formula One, when a team principal praises the rules, it usually means they've just found the perfect way around them. And in Mexico, that way around looked painted in red, driven by the one man who knows better than anyone how to turn controversy into speed, Sir Lewis Hamilton. To understand what really changed in Mexico, you have to look beyond the headlines and into the mechanics of control. The Ferrari SF25 has been, all season long, a paradox, blisteringly fast in theory, temperamental in practice. Its aerodynamic platform was built on a delicate concept, an ultra-sensitive floor that depended on millimetric precision in ride height. At circuits like Austin or Silverstone, that sensitivity translated into chaos. Any minor difference in track bumpiness or crosswind sent the car into unpredictable slides. Hamilton had spent 9 months battling that imbalance, often describing it as dancing with a partner who keeps changing rhythm mid-step. But in Mexico, the rhythm finally stabilized. The reason lies in the thin air above Mexico City. At over 2,200 meters of altitude, the air is 20% less dense than sea level. That affects everything: downforce, cooling, even the driver's breathing. Yet, strangely, it leveled the field. For the SF25, which has struggled to generate rear-end stability in normal conditions, the low-density air reduced aerodynamic load enough to calm its rear platform. The car lost grip, yes, but it lost it evenly, giving Hamilton the one thing he'd been missing all season: predictability. That alone could have explained the improvement, but what came next revealed something deeper, something the FIA had kept in the shadows. Ferrari had been developing a new, adaptive brake temperature compensation system since spring, a software protocol designed to stabilize brake pressure by automatically adjusting hydraulic sensitivity as temperatures fluctuated. Under FIA Technical Directive TD-45, this feature had been put under review, effectively frozen since July. The FIA claimed it wanted to prevent automated dynamic corrections that could indirectly influence aerodynamic load distribution. But Ferrari argued the system was purely safety-related, ensuring consistent pedal feel. For months, they waited. Then, on the Thursday before Mexico, the FIA quietly cleared the system for use, reportedly under revised oversight. Within 48 hours, Hamilton felt a car that finally braked the way he needed it to. That subtle clearance made a monumental difference. In Hamilton's telemetry, braking pressure variance dropped from 8% to under 3%. For a Formula One driver, that's the difference between guessing and knowing. It allowed him to attack the corners with full confidence, trail braking deeper and rotating the SF25 with precision rather than instinct. The new system balanced the rear brakes thermally, preventing the oscillations that had made the car snappy in mid-turn entries. It wasn't a new component, it was a permission restored. And that's where Vasseur's quiet frustration with the FIA becomes clearer. Ferrari had built a tool within the rules, only to have it shelved for clarification. Once that restriction was lifted, Hamilton's lap times did the talking. What makes Hamilton exceptional in moments like this isn't just speed, it's comprehension. Few drivers in history possess the mechanical empathy he does. He reads the car like a living organism. In Mexico, as temperatures shifted from late afternoon warmth to evening coolness, he adjusted brake bias manually in 3 corners to compensate for micro variations in surface temperature. Most drivers rely entirely on data engineers for that feedback. Hamilton felt it through the pedal. That's why the engineers trust him implicitly. His feedback after the session wasn't a list of complaints, but an orchestration. Front axle perfect into turn 1, rear balance clean mid-entry, brake phase consistent, finally consistent. For Ferrari's mechanics, those were magic words. The deeper secret, though, may not have been the brakes alone. Some sources suggest that Ferrari's forbidden secret, the one Vasseur indirectly referenced, involved the interaction between the thermal mapping and the rear floor vortex structure. By stabilizing brake temperature, the airflow balance under the floor became smoother, reducing turbulence in the diffuser wake. In essence, a legal thermal fix had created an aerodynamic benefit, one that the FIA perhaps hadn't anticipated. That's why Vasseur's smile carried both pride and caution. Ferrari hadn't broken the rules, they'd outsmarted their ambiguity. And Hamilton, with all his experience, had been the perfect man to exploit that fine line between compliance and genius.